Hey, there we are. Double checking everything's working properly. Desktop audio check. Oops. Got Joe BGM. Voice check. Yep. This looks weird. Why is it like that? Whoops. It looks like every single time I touch my screen, something always breaks. I don't like it. Alright. Game design session. Hi, folks. It's been a long week. 2 days ago, I had the interview with the Apex Legends Esports Commissioner. I have an article about that coming up with Upcomer soon, as soon as it passes editorial inspection, of course. Gotta get it fixed or examined. And now we need to figure out where we were last time, because it's been a while. I have missed multiple days of streaming, to my annoyance. Generally, life has been a little... I wouldn't say life has been tough. I'd say my ability to match the energy required to meet the challenges of life and stream at the same time has been surprisingly difficult to maintain. Can't complain too badly though. Most of this, after all, is in fact self-imposed. Self-imposed stress is the worst kind of stress, but that's alright. Alright. Enough talking about that though. What I want to talk about first is to step one, go over the concepting document that we made last time, or I made last time, to see with fresh eyes that are now a week away from concepting, to see if anything I wrote here is something I want to keep. Which will be most of it. I don't anticipate suddenly not wanting to make this game. But we are hitting the tough part of any sort of creative project, the middle of the road, where the freshness of an idea and how excited you were at the start no longer applies, and all that's left for you is the hard work to actually get to the end. And that's the part where things kind of drop off for a lot of people. It's why aspiring novelists never actually finish their books. It's why aspiring musicians never actually finish the songs or practice well enough to make it through a band audition. It's why artists have so many projects in their back burners that they'll never actually get around to. But this is also the part where having a little personal discipline goes a very long way. Which is why I'm doing these streams, because I want this game to exist. I wanted to get to the Games Workshop, the Boardgame Workshop contest. I want it in front of their judges' eyes, and I want feedback on it. Hopefully it won't be too discouraging when I do. But before any of that, I need the game actually made to some extent. So, review time. Step 1, the abstract. Let's see, asymmetrical 1v1 game. You're basically playing the hero versus the Demon King of a standard isekai RPG that's basically based around the granddaddy of JRPGs. Fantasy God motif, the Dragon Quest tropes involved. Isekai factions. You are able to level up your hero by facing challenges set by the Dungeon Master, whereas the Dungeon Master is trying to use the dungeon itself to kill the hero units to stop any sort of interference in your stuff. So a lot of it, if you've ever played Netrunner before, 1, you're amazing, I love you already. 2, you probably haven't played Netrunner. But a lot of the basic concept is, in fact, Netrunner, where the corporation sets up the defenses or the traps and the assassins and everything else, and the hacker has to get through them. A lot of that is carried over in Project Isekai, except for the actual implementation of the mechanics. With Netrunner, it was entirely based on basically playing cards. It was superficially, and by superficially I mean extremely superficially, sort of like Magic the Gathering. But otherwise, the overall concept of a 1v1 asymmetrical game based on cards and tiles persists. Game type, yeah, make a living dungeon. A victor's placement on tiles determines available chances for that instance. I think the biggest thing I want to address on the review is how I want to actually use the tiles. When I concepted it the last time, it was using tiles of different, like, physical shapes. We would have rectangular ones, we have octagons, we have triangles. And my idea there is that the fewer number of sides that the tile would have, the dungeon room would have, the fewer points that affords the dungeon master to use for resources and traps and like guardians and stuff like that. I'm not actually sure if I want to keep that. Logistically, let's see. Yeah, right here. Defense takes it for dungeon tiles. All tiles must be interconnected. There must be at least one viable path to the artifact at all times, at all points of the game. If the opposing player can prove there isn't, the artifact ability punishes the Demon King instead. Early on, the Demon King can only afford weak defenses, slimes, pitfalls, etc. So all tiles must be interconnected. In this particular instance, making the tiles different shapes is maybe a little counterproductive. I think it makes the overall designing like challenge maybe a little more than I actually want to work with. So that's the feature. Let me see. It's hard to see artifacts. Time. If all artifacts including the seed are somehow destroyed or removed from the game, the DM starts the next turn by placing the seed artifact back into the game with the predefined layout. Any remaining structures from a previous dungeon are left unchanged, but must be attached to a new dungeon by at least one adjacent surface. Surfaces do not need to be viable paths, but the player party must still be able to access artifacts from the starting position with basic actions or the DM suffers another penalty. I think that's actually pretty clever. No matter how I design the dungeon, like, I think I want to maintain this mechanic. The usage of seed, like sacrificial seeds, to make instant dungeon layouts, however, can probably create degenerate situations. Like I'm thinking of how to put it. I'm thinking of possible issues where you deliberately sacrifice a seed 1 or 2 or 3 times just to make a really long dungeon, and by early mid game, right? So that encourages the player to have to invest a lot into movement upgrades, or actually no. I guess you can just make teleporters, right? As long as you remember to give the hero player or the attacking player, if I'm not going to call them heroes, because morally, in terms of game design, I'm not always going to have the so-called native world players be the good guys, or at least obvious good guys. Yeah, it's just a matter of like making sure that they have the tools to do the job they need to, and making sure their tools themselves have some kind of cost. So I'm not going to worry about that too early on in the basic structure. Seed artifact itself should be fairly weak, because early on you don't want to have all of your power invested in the early game. Isekai got some as a hero with equipment to stop the artifacts. It's basically so this section is basically saying that the hero player should be a Magikarp. You start weak, you get strong later. Still have a couple major weaknesses in the end because it is in fact a Gyarados. But yeah, movement is a necessity for the hero cards to define how fast they can go through the dungeon. So in the end, if they do enough damage, if they explore enough and level up enough, a hero unit can pretty much traverse a huge swath of the dungeon without having to worry about like running out of turns. Too much stamina near the end, however, I can see that as being a problem as well, and that the late game rounds become very involved, and that's a card design function, or that's like designing hero units and balancing around the late game situation. I can already see a couple situations there, right? Like if you're gating stamina as a way to explore as well and or use abilities, then all you do is make movement really cheap, but high level ability effects and equipment requiring extra stamina to use, right? So even if the hero can say leap through 10 tiles at once and not burn through more than a third of his or her stamina, if their abilities are equally stamina efficient, then they will have a hard time actually overcoming like expensive dungeon tiles and dungeon traps, which is just something I need to remember. Each tile corresponds to a type of threat that Demon King decides to field. I'm not sure if I actually want to keep this. Defeat this part, no. This part, yes. So that's the fundamental tension that I want in the game. Early on, both of them are magic harps. The Dungeon Master can't afford particularly expensive and threatening mechanics. A slime should be defeatable with a basic iron sword, to give a standard RPG example. You're grinding against rats and slimes, you're not going to have a particularly difficult time unless the dice really goes up against you. But at the same time, the hero can't fight anything stronger than slimes in the first place, starting out. They have zero experience, zero combat experience, zero knowledge of the strengths and weaknesses of what they're facing, so on and so forth. Keeping to that theme. Let me see. The event phase I definitely want to keep. Even if the judges were to tell me to drop this, I would simply politely disagree for one very clear reason. The whole point of this section is rebuttal against a game that I thought I would like, but was very, very disappointed by. So this I'm keeping as a way not only to introduce a randomizing element to the game, a way to force progression when the game stalls out, and as a way to refute what I felt was a very, very slipshod design for Terminal Directive, Netrunner's first and only story expansion. Let's see, what else? Currently, yeah, Victor. This, I'm still thinking over the win conditions. Maybe. I feel like when I made these, I was trying to find elegant ways to represent win conditions without having to like outright. No, what was I saying? I was trying to find win condition mechanics that were easy to represent with the state of the game itself. Like what I don't like to do with a game, especially with a competitive game, is having to write down individual points for individual actions. That level of abstract, I feel, takes you out of the game. Whereas if you're like tangibly losing a physical card or a physical resource, which HP does not count, so that kind of already like throws a wrench in that plan. But I like it when, say, you can die because you have a grip size of 0, for instance, because you literally took brain damage, as you can in Netrunner. Things like that. Things that you can track with like artistic counters, with the number of cards in your hand, with the number of reservoirs, like with Pokemon TCG, for instance. I'm not even sure this is still the rules, since I haven't actually played the Pokemon TCG since Generation 1 was out. That is many years ago. But, if I recall correctly, the whole win condition there was that you're trying to win the prizes, up to 6 prizes on the field. Each prize would be a face-down card, right? And defeating a Pokemon lets you reveal and take one of those prizes as a resource, basically a gym badge. Being able to track the state of your progress towards winning physically like that, and also being rewarded like that, I feel it was a really like elegant mechanic. There are similar things with Netrunner, for instance. Literally, it's a matter of counting up to 7. As long as you have cards taken out of the opponent's deck, the agenda cards with their value points adding up to 7 or more, you won the game. Like the moment you grab the card. And the same with the corporation player. Once you score those cards, you put them into a separate pile. You just keep track of the numbers literally written on the cards. The cards themselves represent the win state, or the progression towards the win for you, which is, I feel, fundamentally a better system than Magic the Gathering's 20 life points. For one, all win conditions are, strictly speaking, abstract and what's the word I'm looking for? I'm gonna be doing this a lot where there's like zone out trying to find a word because I am so tired this week. Arbitrary. That's the word I'm looking for. Fundamentally, all win conditions are arbitrary, but they feel less so, and they feel more immersive if there's like a physical quality to what you're tracking. And life points are not. It doesn't matter if you're using dice. It doesn't matter if you're scribbling it down on a note card. It doesn't matter if you have one of like those like spinny trackers. The fact of the matter is, there's no solid lore reason. There's no represented reason for it to be. Hold on, I gotta pause because some last minute business came up. This will not take me more than a couple minutes. Sorry about that, folks. The basic gist of it is that esports season is in full swing. And that means I am busy as hell. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Where was I? Right, win-loss conditions. I do kind of like this. On the hero side, their loss condition is losing their stock of predetermined available heroes. And the reason why I want this is in fact lore based. It isn't just a matter of like game design to represent like how far or close you are from losing, but also like a criticism of isekai, and that they tend to treat heroes like, once you scratch away at the whole adventurism level, right? What we're talking about is a god tossing like a completely random stranger into a world in the universe that they did not grow up in, expecting them to basically act as a human weapon to solve major problems for them. And sure, you can frame it as heroism, but dang, dude, gods should really just like sometimes directly interfere. This, however, is the weakest part. The enemy player loses it, their HP goes to 0. Let's not do that. This is so clumsy. This is the Magic Gathering system. I don't like that. It's inelegantly portrayed. Having to keep track of an arbitrary number just doesn't seem fundamentally fun. It doesn't tie into what you're doing. It doesn't tie into the whole narrative in the story that you're developing the game. So let's say the demon player loses if 5 artifacts are destroyed or stolen. I think that's a little closer. That portrays the dungeon master player as somebody that needs to be able to protect the resources. A max number. And let's remove a hard max baked into the rules. I don't want to say that it always has to be 5, right? Let's see. That's something to myself. Yeah, customization and build, like, as another tangent to what I like to see in game design. I like it when the players have some level of customization to how they play the game, which is why I've been playing Magic Gathering and Netrunner and even Legend of the Five Rings for a little bit. Although, frankly, it's probably better now. But when I played Legend of the Five Rings, the living card game version that came out a couple years ago and now has stopped tournament support, there was definitely a lot of controversy about Orientalism, and especially how the white player base would treat the tropes and the cultural details that went into the game. That was basically a Pan-Asian fantasy, right? I get the gist now that the player base is more reasonable about this in the aftermath of all the attacks on East Asian folks in the US, but I kind of feel like it's really regrettable that it took people actually dying and grandmas getting assaulted for them to like get the fucking point. But yeah. Overall, I'm attracted to games that give you some level of control over the strategy that you're piloting into it, and that also support a wide range of strategies. Whether it's a rushdown deck, a burn deck, a control deck, especially control deck. Control decks come in like 15 different flavors with a good game. Or a combo deck, where you're playing almost outside of the rules, or rather taking advantage of the fringes of the rules for degenerate interactions that win you the game once you get everything together. Those are fun. I think my very first competitive... Yeah, it was. The very first competitive Magic deck I've ever like spent money on was a Tooth and Claw Pentavus Disciple of the Vault combo deck. That as soon as you have mana echoes up and can generate mana every single time you use Pentavus's abilities, the opposing player just basically lost an arbitrary amount of life. And that was during like the middle of the Ravager Affinity meta. That meta sucked. I can't believe I still play competitive Magic through that era, because it just skull claps everywhere. You gain like giant like 4/4 creatures on turn 1 and swing on turn 2 for like a bajillion damage. Man. That was... Honestly, it was kind of fun. Because I was starting out, so I didn't really have any attachment to the tournament play yet. but seeing what Magic was capable of supporting as basically a game engine was pretty revelatory. I definitely don't want to allow that kind of level of degeneracy with this game, but I do want to allow that level of interactive freedom. So yeah, that's why I'm building this game with the idea that the players are able to customize how they approach any game-to-game matchup. Competitive play. It wouldn't be competitive if basically you're just rolling the dice and following instructions, right? Demon player may lose if a max number of artifacts are destroyed or stolen. Abilities may trigger upon loss of artifact depending on demon persona card chosen at the start of the game. Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, this is pretty good. Make sure that this, whether or not I use certain dungeon tile shapes or if I just want them all standardized. I am now leaning, a week after I wrote this document, towards standardized dungeon tiles. Both for simplified production and for simplified, no, not simplified, but rather, if anything, standardized shapes actually afford me more freedom in development. If I'm forced to use squares, triangles, and hexagons, or pentagons, that poses problems in that I'm tied to only those kind of shapes and interactions that must involve dungeon tile like placement, and I don't think that might be something I want to explore later on once I get like a playtest group, right? But it's easier to simply like write down what kind of feature this dungeon tile has, or make the dungeon tiles themselves like cards that you can just like lay out in front of the opposing player, right? But we'll see. We'll see. What else? That's enough of a review. I've isolated the parts that I'm not comfortable with a week later, and I've also isolated where I want to go next. So, new document. Why can I not find? Something's going on with my copy of OBS. Like, you would expect a news source like this to appear on the list, but it's not showing up. At least not on the, let's see, presentation screen. Voice mod, design doc, that can remove. No. Then I want this over here, but where is it? Huh? Let me see. If I simply refresh that tab, oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, I got to do something about OBS's refusal to work properly with me. Okay. Turn structure. The demon player has to go first every single time. And logically, this has to be so. Because without the dungeon to run, the hero has nothing to do. Duh. Okay, so make sure I make a note of that. Dungeon master. Oh, this goes first to set up. Dungeon. So that means we will work on the DM turn flow. This is the least fun part, honestly. Because you have to think pretty rigidly here. You have to not only like imagine how the turn order will play out, but also imagine how they might misinterpret your intentions and rules and prevent that, to cut that off at the head. So this is the technical writing part. Let me see. Where did I put my phone? Put a sword, put it out in front of me. Me? No? Look, it's a plastic, game controller, focus right, more plastic, copy of Night Watch. Fine later. It's not necessary right now. Kind of below my nose. Excuse me for a second. All right, there we go. Turn flow. Dungeon maintenance phase. The artifacts reward you for how long they've been in play. And every single turn that they are in play, they should be gaining a level represented somehow to show that they're powering up. And if you have more than one artifact in play, you gain more resources than you would have with a single art. That has to stay. That presents a build dilemma, a gameplay, a strategic dilemma for the Dungeon Master player. And that they don't want to have too many artifacts around that are too hard to defend against intrusions. But at the same time, in order to defend them against intrusions, you are encouraged to have multiple artifacts out to gain more resources. Now I've heard my phone. Where did I put it? Shit, it sounds like it was underneath something, but what? Oh shoot! Oh, I just tilted the camera. Sorry about that, folks. That was awkward. Okay, there we go. That's our wallet. Oh, there it is. It's parked on top of the console. Whoops. Who's bugging me? What did I miss? No, that's fine. Nothing important. Nothing high priority. Oh, man. I'm sorry. I realize, even as I'm saying everything here, that I am sounding tired and kind of depressed as fuck. I'm not actually depressed, but I am very, very, very tired. It has been a challenging week on multiple levels. Part of it just due to lack of sleep. Like, in order to secure the interview with EA about their esports program, a channel with less than 20 subscribers as of this moment obviously wasn't going to do it alone. Let's be quite honest here. The fact that I was able to do it at all implies a number of things about myself, and that I had industry connections to find the right people to talk with. But it also meant that I made a deal. It was a very lucrative deal for me. Quite frankly, I would have made less money doing it myself in the first place. But it was a deal that involved deadlines. And deadlines means I don't sleep until I'm done. So I'm very tired and very sleep deprived. But not sleepy, because I have been heavily caffeinated. Nonetheless, it means I'm operating at about like 50% brain capacity as of this moment. You can tell that because it's been 40 minutes into the stream and I've only started on the next phase of it. The review process took a very, very long time because I had to think very slowly. Blah. Anyhow. That's what goes into making moves. Where was I? Right. Turn flow. Dungeon maintenance phase. No artifacts in play. This is... let's be honest with ourselves. This is basically Magic's upkeep. Upkeep basing artifacts in play. Install seed artifact. No artifact in play. Collect resources based on current artifact levels. If there are maintenance costs for traps. The idea here is that the most powerful defenses you can place into a dungeon are basically anti-hero units. Goblin champions, liches, beholders, shoggoths, things that need feeding. And one form or another, or things that need paying if it's a mercenary band. You want them, but they're going to cost you. There. Nice and simple. You can choose not to pay for a mercenary's efforts, but that means they in turn choose to stop working for you. Upkeep. Depot research. This is the step where you draw a card and expand your options pool. What do I want to call that? Actually no, let's call it draw step. Draw step. And draws from that makes sense. Let's see. Do I want it so that way they lose or suffer bad effects if they cannot draw from an empty deck? Or do I want to have them simply recycle everything? No, I do not want the latter. It's usually better to have the graveyard as an interactable field as well. Gives you more depth of strategy. Also means that necromancers aren't just like screwed if they run out of cards. Assuming you use a necromancer archetype. I definitely want to be able to explore some of the darker themes of fantasy. Madness, for instance. Having your sanity stripped away. And the rules of the world turned against you by eldritch deities. Waking up because the stars have finally aligned for them to overturn the natural logic of the world. So something like running out of cards wins you the game if you're playing this particular champion or this particular DM. So, let me have to go on mute again to double check something for business. It is going to be a busy couple weeks and then a busy couple months. More than a couple. Yep, sorry about that again. This is not the sort of job where you can simply work 9 to 5, simply like shut down all interactions with your profession immediately at 5 o'clock and the moment you step out of the office. One, we're all work from home, so that doesn't work. Two, esports happens at every single possible hour. And I should know. Better than most anybody else in the field. Oof. But it's not my job that's making me tired. My self-imposed project's making me tired. Yeesh. Big yeesh. Why did I work so hard again? Oh, right. Because I wanted to. Because I thought it would be fun. And this is a total aside. I'm basically making this a stream, a rant stream, because I'm tired and I want to tell you why I'm so tired. Which is mostly just telling myself why I'm so tired. But the reason why I'm exhausted is because occasionally I get this huge itch to prove to myself that I'm capable of doing something. And so I do it. Even though I know it's hard work. Even though I know it's probably going to leave me with bruises, sores, cuts, or simple exhaustion from caffeine overdose. And at the moment, I don't feel too good about it. But it's going to happen again and again because in a day or two, or even as much as a week or two, or even a month or two. No, not that long. It never takes up to a month for me to like look back and think, hell yeah, I pulled that off. But like, in the process, in between now and then is the exhaustion phase, where I just feel like I really punched myself to pull this off, which I did. I don't ever want to see 3 a.m. on my alarm clock ever again if I don't expect, if I have to be up before noon the next day. Shit. Yeah. Let's go back to the fun stuff. Let's see, where was I? Draw face is pretty simple. Let's call this the scheme phase. I like that. Scheme. So what I did here is set up the actions they can take to set up their dungeon. And by writing this, I have also expanded the number of supplies that the DM will need, and two, the customization that they are allowed. A random tile from their tile supply means that they are working with two different strategic resources. They are working with the cards in hand and the cards in their deck that they've put together in anticipation of whatever encounters they have to fight. And then also does quasi-designing the dungeon before the dungeon is even laid out. Let's see. Yeah. A random dungeon tile that has to be able to connect to anything else currently in the dungeon, which means that you have an arbitrary number of, like, sorry, adjusting my scene. I really threw replace this chair. It's so squeaky. Anyhow, yeah. By doing this, it means that they don't necessarily have a choice of which cards are going to be, like which dungeon tiles are going to be dead ends or not, or like completely open. So every dungeon between game to game, even if they pre-select the tiles that they get to work with, are going to be inherently some level of different from the game before. I think that's clever. No game will ever be played exactly the same twice, unless I give them too many tutor mechanics. Those are always a little dangerous. Tutor cards, you see those a lot in Magic, are inherently very powerful. Sometimes they're outright necessary in order to not have the game devolve into a stalemate. But it's definitely possible to overdo them. Europa just posted a picture of a Telecaster. That's quite nice. There's my utility light tab. Is that Fender Squire or just a classic? No, it's a classic. Let me see that original picture. I am obsessed with guitars, and Europa, you just posted a picture of a very nice Telecaster style. Let's see how nice. Oh, it's a Fender Player Series. That is actually like pro hardware. That's an interesting choice, though. He chose two dual humbuckers instead of classic plates. That's not traditional for a Telecaster. Silver Telecaster. Alright, where was I? Right. So the Dungeon Master has to be basically designing two decks. One that's basically towels in a felt bag that they reach the claws into and plunk down with all the majesty of an evil villain. And one that is their strategic deck, and it's what they're using to represent like the guards or the pitfalls or stuff like that. Yeah, this way gameplay changes dynamically. I like that. I think that's an elegant way to make sure that the game doesn't get too stale too soon. Let's see, pay for dungeon expansion, install dungeon tile. What else can they do? You use a DM ability right on here. Yeah, that's elegant. So the question I was wrangling here was how closely I wanted to tie into Netrunner, which uses kind of awkward, honestly, kind of an arbitrary click system, in which if you are a hacker, you have a maximum of 4 actions you can do a turn, and if you are a corporation, you have a maximum of 3. But corporations always have a 4th action in terms of a free yet mandatory card draw. I don't think I want that. The less of an arbitrary mechanic there is, the more comfortable I am with the game, and easier it is to track as well. So instead, if they are going to track anything, they're going to be tracking the type of actions they take in ACE during the scheme, whether it is to expand the dungeon, to install a trap on a tile, to pay for an effect card, to use their DM ability. And they can only do it once per scheme, per action type. It's easy enough to remember whether or not you've installed a tile, whether or not you've installed a trap, or whether or not you've used an ability in your hand. And by limiting it to once per turn, they can't simply take their entire hand and say, I do all these at once. 15 moves. Read them and weep, sucker. No, let's not allow anything that degenerate. If I do want to make a model update, I definitely want to increase the flexibility with my lip movements. They're a little limited. More expensive though. What else? after scheme, there is. So this is another differentiating point between this game and Netrunner. In Netrunner, there is another arbitrary mechanic where the corporation player, who has all the secret agendas that everybody's looking for to either push themselves and dominate the world with their successful conclusion, or for the hacker to steal before they come to fruition and ruin everybody else's day. Here, the artifacts themselves have a flavor reason for existing. They are basically doomsday weapons that have to power up slowly over time by absorbing the energy of the world around them. Which means that the whole point is to either destroy them before they can destroy the world, or to protect them as much as possible. And they can't really protect themselves unless otherwise stated. That means, and because there is always a seed artifact for that has to be installed for the DM to be in the game. It means that the arbitrary number of agendas that goes into a Netrunner corp deck is not a necessary mechanic for this game. What you have instead is a desire to use more powerful artifacts than the seed artifact. So if you lose the seed artifact, it doesn't hurt you too much. Along with the fact that having multiple artifacts out at once is basically gives you multiple points of vulnerability for the hero players to exploit. And balancing that kind of risk pushing, like you want more artifacts to gain more power in the game itself and to have more flexible options. But having too many artifacts out at once makes it harder to defend your dungeon and easier for you to lose. So, yes, they can install artifacts down as if they were simple encounter cards, right? To basically treat it as a trap, to use it basically as a bait, and that would be monumentally stupid. Because if the hero player does decide to take the bait and find out what that face down card is and turns out to be an artifact, they've automatically become that much closer to winning the game. But there are occasionally values in bluffing, especially if it's game point. You just need to bluff the shit out and just like last one more round. I feel like, as foolish as the action could be, giving them the option in the first place to self-sabotage is one, honestly pretty good game design, and two, freaking hilarious. If they lose that way, that's just... I would consider the game as having been successfully designed. Let me see. Next, after Scheme. Event Phase. That's right. And that is a great randomizer, or the great plot twist, hard-coded into the steps of the game. There will always be an event deck. That event deck will be comprised of cards from both players. And they will always cost the same amount to trigger the event, but the events themselves will be semi-random. Like thinking like clear plastic sleeves always for this. You just like shuffle them with the charge tracker on top, face up. And as soon as it does, you take off all those beads, you flip it over, you resolve that effect. And it might completely screw over everything that the demon has done prior to the activation of the event card. Or it gives them extra cards for the next game, or the next turn. Or it gives the opposing player extra cards to work with. Or it sabotages the opposing player. Or basically, this is my rebuttal to Terminal Directive distilled into a single phase. Every single turn, something unique is either going to happen or could happen as a result of human choice. This is designed to keep the game moving no matter what. And also designed to cause interesting effects. Cal levels, suddenly, for instance. Completely arbitrary and goofy surprises. Depending on how the players want to stack their effect cards into the combined pool. There we go. And there we go. There is the DM's turn flow. They maintain their artifacts, they draw new options, they sell their dungeon, any schemes they have. The event phase potentially causes it all to come crashing down or rewards them for doing whatever they've done before. And then they end their turn and becomes the hero party's turn. They resolve all end turn effects sequentially, and the DM, because it is their turn, gets to choose in what order that is done. That is the privilege of the player in control of the turn. And that is 50% of the game. I think. Yeah. To loop back to the scheme phase, when I say that artifacts can be installed face down 2 for free, but this is either monumentally stupid or a result of a forced installation effect, this may very well be that forced installation effect. Let's see. Something like the Dungeon Master reveals their hand, and the opposing player chooses X number of encounter or artifact cards from the hand to install in the field. Dungeon Master may shuffle the installed cards before install. Shuffle the chosen cards before installing. Something like that. Something to basically add an unpredictable effect to the game that doesn't just cause disruption and chaos, but also causes new opportunities for either player. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. Alright, well, that's good enough for now. I have streamed for an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm still so tired. I have not recovered at all. But yeah. Despite me being mentally exhausted from everything I've done this week, including making a high-profile interview, I think that this has come out surprisingly well. This feels playable and concise. That you're not guessing what you have to do from phase to phase, because each phase has like a sort of theme to it, right? Basic maintenance, the draw, the scheme, which is most of what the DM has full control over. The event phase, which they deliberately don't, and then the end of the turn becomes the opposing player's turn to mess around with a dungeon that they've just created. That feels pretty good. Yeah, I like that so far. Let's save it. Game design drafts. Turn structures. Yeah. Alright. That'll be it for now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around. Somebody's watching for over an hour, 13 minutes. That's impressive. And I will see you tomorrow with Persona 5. And there may be a Gorilla stream later this week because of a certain package I have received. All right.